Despite all the increased attention, bullying is still a huge problem in our schools. For the most part, society is still trying to figure out how to best deal with the issue.
We know that these days bullying not only takes place inside the school and on the playground, but online as well. So if your child is being bullied, what do? Who do you talk to at school?
Joining us now in studio to talk more about this, we have Greg Anderson. He's the author of Bully Stop Now, A School Superintendent Tells You How. In addition to being a former school superintendent, Greg is also a former school principal. And in your book, Greg, you say the most important person in dealing with bullying at the school is the principal. So how did you deal with it when the subject came up?
It's by far the most important is the principal. As a principal, the biggest thing they have to be doing is being highly visible throughout the school. They've got to be in the playground, they've got to be in the classrooms, the hallways, the cafeteria, the bus stop. The critical component is knowing the kids and knowing who's doing what, so that you're going to get information to you informally from kids and staff. And I think the biggest thing principals need to be aware of is that they have the ability to be able to minimize the amount of bullying at their school.
And are enough principals doing that?
I would like to see more principals doing that. I found in my experience, and I've supervised over 200 principals in my career, some get tied up with paperwork in the office, so they get taken away to central board office meetings. And I think the critical person in bullying prevention is the principal, the leadership of the principal at the school level.
Okay, so Greg, tell us what information in this book. You retired 3 weeks ago, so now you're free to talk about this. What in the book is going to upset other principals or school boards?
Well, I think first of all, one of the biggest things I had difficulty with, even as a principal and certainly as a school superintendent, is the amount of time that principals are pulled out of their schools. The public would be amazed if they knew just how frequently principals are pulled out, either to meetings in the district school board office or ministry workshops. The principal is your critical link in bullying prevention at school. There's very little attention paid to the principals. I read all the time from social workers, professors, lawyers, people who've not worked in the school system. I have. I was a principal for better part of 13 and a half years. I've been a superintendent for 14. And I think the critical component that people need to be looking at bullying is what role does the principal play? How can the principal be a better advocate for the students of the school? And they can't do that if they're pulled out of the school on a regular basis.
And the other thing too, Greg, is it seems to me that principals nowadays don't spend as many years at the same school before moving on. It used to be the principal was there for many years, and as you say, got to know the kids. So that if the principal had been there for 3 or 4 years, the kid who was a problem in grade 9, by grade 12, maybe isn't so much of a problem, or you know he's maybe the go-to guy when you need some information. And is that something that should be addressed, that principals maybe should spend longer periods of time in the school, at the same school, knowing the student body and knowing who's capable of what?
Well, I think the vast majority of principals would like to stay at a long time at a school, but that's not their choice. It's dealt with by the school senior administration, school board senior administration. They tend to move principals on an average around 5 years.
Why?
The feeling is that after a certain number of times, years, they could become stale. They've been there long enough, it's time to move them on. And also, as parents listening to this broadcast know, sometimes parents are thrilled with their principal, want the principal to be there forever. And sometimes they're not thrilled. They're just the opposite. They want the principal to be gone. So it's that balancing act. That's where the political forces get in with school trustees dealing with the school superintendents.
I want to ask you something you've got in your book. You talk about the conditions necessary for bullying, and the first one is not standing up to a bully. So if I read this correctly, what you're suggesting is if you stand up and say, I'm not interested in hearing that, you can't say that to me, or I will go tell someone if you do this, that there's a better chance that the bully won't proceed because they don't perceive you as someone who's going to put up with it. Now, when you go to the Government of Ontario website, they have a guide for parents with kids in elementary and secondary schools. Their piece of advice is stay calm and walk away from the situation. So I noticed that, they don't suggest you stand up for yourself. Is there a reason for that, do you think?
Well, it's the idea of being peaceful and keeping everything calm. The reality is bullies don't necessarily react well to just being walked away from. In my experience, what you need for a student, if you've got a child at home who's being bullied, you don't want them to go and physically have an altercation, but you do have to give the indication to the bully that you are going to look after yourself. You are going to aggressively state to the bully, leave me alone, I don't want that. And the critical thing I also mentioned in the book is having a group of friends that will help do that. Where it's different is with cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is probably the biggest change in bullying that I've certainly seen in my career. And my career spanned almost 40 years.
Greg, you say in your book that these anti-bullying laws don't work. I'm surprised because when the laws came out, most people say, that's great, we've got to have that. People have got to know where they stand and what's legal and what isn't. If the anti-bullying laws don't work, tell us what will work.
Well, I'll tell you for starters why they don't believe they work. First of all, the people who are saying they work are non-educators. They're not people working in the schools. They're usually written by politicians, lawyers who are putting stuff together. It's like a band-aid approach. The reality is bullying is the best dealt with by the personnel in the school, whether it's the principal, the teachers, the guidance counselors. Those people know what's going on. To simply say we're going to write a law and have everybody adhere to it, some 9-year-old kid in the school playground doesn't even know the law exists, let alone follow it. I think the biggest thing you need to do, I have it in my book, it's new, it's my own, it's the 13-point bullying prevention plan, and I go through step-by-step things that need to be done in the school. It can be done right across the country. It is not of any cost to the school board. It requires the principal to take leadership at a variety of levels. It's very much detailed in the book.
And I do want to go back to this point you're making about the principal, they're the key. I can understand that they represent authority. You know, they're the boss and watch out for that person. Is that the reason the principal is so effective, or is there some other power or tools that they have that I don't know about?
I don't mean to be rude and try and cut you off. Yes and no. They have the legal authority under the Education Act in Ontario to take disciplinary action, which might include suspension or even expulsion. However, more importantly, they have the ability to lead a school team. So you can bring in a social worker, a child and youth worker, a behavior counselor, a guidance counselor. Get some people in there to work with some counseling, not just for the victims, but also for the bully themselves to try and change the way. So that's when I talk about the principal being so important. And nobody mentions this. From Barbara Coloroso on down, they all talk about other people, but don't specify who the critical person is in the school system.
The book is called Bullies Stop Now, A School Superintendent Tells You How. Greg Anderson's the author. Greg, thanks so much for joining us
You're
today.
welcome.
Let's do all we can to prevent bullying in the schools. And good luck with the book.
Thanks.